Hey everyone, today I want to do a review of the movie Vivarium. This came out in 2019. It was directed by Larkin Finnegan. It stars Imogen Poots and Jesse Eisenberg. I don't know Larkin Finnegan's work. I've never seen anything that had Imogen Poots in it as far as I know. Maybe it did. I didn't look her up after the movie. And Jesse Eisenberg, I've seen a few of his films. He's kind of hit or miss for me. I like him more in dramatic, smaller roles. But I thought this was... I guess I feel a lot of things about this movie, so that's why I wanted to even make this video, because I wanted to just get some of my thoughts out on it, because I walked away from this movie feeling really frustrated and annoyed, and it wasn't because it was a bad movie. It was actually a pretty decent movie. I think most people would find it entertaining, but I found it really disappointing as a screenwriter and someone who's worked on feature films, and I've made short films, and I kind of wished it would have gone in a different direction. And I think that this idea really lended itself more to a short film than it did to a feature film, and I'll kind of come back to this later. So I think that this movie really kind of made me feel frustrated in a way, because there was like this wasted potential is what I felt. So the movie has a really interesting setup if you haven't seen it yet. Basically Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, they're a couple. He's some kind of builder, she's a teacher, and anyways, they go and they are looking for a house together. So this creepy alien looking dude shows them to this place. He takes them out there. It's this brand new suburban thing. It's like the cookie cutter houses that you see, but it's completely deserted. It's like a new housing establishment. And he starts touring them around, and all of a sudden the guy disappears and they can't find their way back out of the suburbia. After a while, a baby appears and they get boxes of food, and they receive notes that basically tell them, if you raise this child, then we'll let you go free. And it turns out that it's not a child, it's some kind of creepy ass little alien baby, and the further along they get, the more disturbing it gets as this child grows. So that right there, I think that's an awesome setup for a movie. I was so excited when I read about that. I was like, let's do this. This sounds honestly like one of the most interesting movies I'll probably watch this year. But once I got through watching it, I found myself disappointed and really just wanting to vent some things about it. So the first half of this movie is really intense, really creepy. I found myself really creeped out, and honestly, when I think back to the beginning of the movie, it's still very tense and it's really creepy, you know, like they get these boxes of food and it's like aliens or something providing it for them. So, you know, they have like freeze-dried shrimp, and things are presented in a way they wouldn't be, and none of the food has flavor, and things are just really disturbing like that. And just thinking about getting lost in this infinite sea of houses you can never get out of, and you're being tricked into raising this thing that you didn't agree to. So in a lot of ways, this movie is really good and disturbing. And then that tension kind of goes downhill as the characters start making worse choices. So like I had mentioned, I make short films. I went to film school. I've easily read hundreds of short film scripts. I've watched the same hundreds of short films. I've worked on dozens of short films. I've done commercials, music videos, short films. I've shot feature films. I have a fairly well-rounded view and experience when it comes to film. And this film, when I was watching it, I knew that it was a short film originally. I could tell that it was a short film, and the whole plot of the movie really only lends itself to being a short film. The second half of the movie proved to me that it was, in fact, started out as a short film, and they never fully adapted it out of that. I don't know if people outside of the industry realize, and you probably do, it might be fairly obvious, but feature films and short films are not the same. And that sounds super condescending, but like, hear me out. The plots you use for short films typically do not work as a feature film idea. So the entire idea of a short film typically is to build intrigue so that people go, they want to fund the full film. Honestly, most of the time when people make short films, it's so they can make it into a full film. And so it's kind of a proof of concept. But the thing about short films that's so different than feature films is that short films have to build intrigue about the world. They don't really give any answers. You kind of are just thrown into a moment or two, right? Whereas with a feature film, we spend much more time with the characters. We want to get to know them. We want to see and understand the choices that they're making. And we want to be able to an extent, figure out the world that they're in, so that we can figure out what choices we would make. And that makes it a little bit more intriguing for us if we get to make choices along with the characters. So the reason that Vivarium feels so much like a short film, and it doesn't feel like it was adapted into a feature film, is because Vivarium shows a cycle. If you watch the full film, and again, spoilers, There are going to be a lot of spoilers in this, okay? So at the end of the film, you realize that Jesse Eisenberg's character, they were purposefully putting the sound in the ground so that he would dig down, he finds the dead body of the last person, and then he dies and they push him in, they throw the bodies in. And so you see that's a cycle, right? They raise the alien child and then it leaves, that's a cycle. So things are happening over and over, and this repetition in the movie, it never really breaks, which is great for a short film, right? You have a 10, 15-minute film, and you get this whole setup where they get stuck with this kid, and they have to raise it, and then all of a sudden you realize they don't get to leave. Nobody ever gets to leave. And the aliens in the movie, they write, you will be released. And the aliens have a different definition of release. That means for them to die. For us, it means to be let go of our cage, aka Vivarium. Vivarium's a terrarium. So the movie shows a full cycle, right? And this is a cycle that has been repeating, and it is implied that it will continue to repeat. That's so great for a short film. It builds intrigue. It makes people want to see the full film. But when you watch a feature film and it has a cycle, and that cycle has been going on and it will go on, it almost, in my opinion, sets up this feeling that what you watched was pointless. The most interesting characters aren't the characters that do the same thing as everybody else has done. The most interesting characters in cinema are the ones that break cycles. They are the ones that see a pattern and they decide to change it instead of going along with it like everybody else does. So in a feature film, you know, we want these characters that grow, and we want characters that are smarter than the average character. So I think the movie would have been so much more interesting personally if at the halfway point they would have ditched what they did. And what they, in my opinion, could have done instead, we would have understood maybe Jesse Eisenberg digs up the body and realizes, wait a second, we're in a cycle. These are the last people. Then they are the characters to break that cycle. And then we would get to understand a little bit more about the world, right? We would get to figure out, who is this kid meeting with? We know that there's some figure that they never see that he's meeting with. Who's dropping off the food? How is this housing market sitting out in the middle of nowhere and nobody knows this exists? When did these aliens get here? Have they always been doing this? Are more housing markets ran by them? There's too many unanswered questions to where it's not even satisfying at the end. And that's why I think I came away from the movie feeling frustrated, because they set up so much. They set up this really interesting world that felt like it was fleshed out, and then it got to the end and I realized it was kind of shallow, like the fake suburbia that they're projecting in the movie. Nothing's real, and that's kind of how it felt. It felt like if the movie was a house and I got a tour of it, they only showed me the outside and I was like, whoa, it's beautiful. And then I step inside and it's a hollow shell. And I think that's what's unfortunate about this movie, is there's several interesting metaphors in there for the way that the housing market treats people. I read an interview where the writer of the original short film, Foxes, he talked about how it was really commentary on how all these housing grids will pop up, all these suburbias, and people will move out there before the market crash in around 2008. And then all of a sudden these people are in these houses that they're about to lose, and they're trapped in these ghost towns essentially. So I love that he brought up the fact that these people feel trapped in suburbia. I love the idea of, are we being used in a way that we don't realize every single day? Is there something that's pulling the strings in a bigger way? It also makes commentary about being a parent. It almost gives the impression of this look at postpartum depression, or parents that didn't want to have children and feel like their children are ruining their life or sucking the fun out of it, and that they can't relate to them. It has a lot of really interesting ideas in it, and a lot of things that I wish they would have explored further. And I think that's why I walked away from the movie feeling upset, is because it seemed like there was going to be more there. And I don't think that movies have to give answers to everything. And by far, I think, it's great when they leave some mystery to a movie, and I love that. But from my time being in film school, one thing that I learned is when people write and direct and things like this, if they know the backstory to their characters or the things that are going on, or they have that perspective, it translates into the film whether or not they show it. But people who don't have that backstory, that don't have that understanding of the characters, they never really flesh them out. They don't know how this world operates. You can feel it on screen. And that's how I felt about this movie. I feel once I came away from it, I genuinely don't think the screenwriters really thought out Where did these aliens come from? How long have they been there? Why are they doing this? I mean, I get it. So something else raises their children, but they're still doing a lot of work, right? So they also make this comparison between a certain species of bird. I'm not sure which one it is, but basically what this species of bird will do is it comes another bird's nest, kill all the young or throw them out or whatever, eat them, and then it lays its own eggs in there. And then it tricks another bird into raising its young. And that's basically what the whole movie is. But what the movie also doesn't address is that those birds don't come back and drop off food for the baby. So why are they being pampered in these other ways? When I get to the end of the movie and everything was said and done, and even thinking about it, I watched it like 2 weeks ago, I keep coming back to the fact that I don't think the screenwriter had answers for a lot of these things. And when you don't have answers for these things, you can't break these cycles, right? They can't have a character change things if they don't even know why things happen in the first place. Now, I'm not trying to accuse the filmmakers or writers or anything of lazy writing or filmmaking by any means. I really do think it was a really intriguing film. And I think with a few tweaks, it could have been really great. And at the end of the day, making a film, it's hard. So the fact that they made a film is amazing. The fact that they made a short film and then adapted it into a movie, that's amazing. I doubt the filmmakers who watched it will see this, but if you do, please know that I'm not trying to insult your film. I really do think it was good. Like, there was gold there and you just dug down to the silver, and it just should have gone a little bit deeper. Speaking of my digging metaphor, I didn't mean to have this segue, but I'm so glad it happened. I want to talk about the fact that Jesse Eisenberg is barely in the movie, right? His character is kind of strange in the movie. I actually felt it was probably the most inconsistent part of the movie. His character seemed irrationally angry. He would go from like desperate to manic. Honestly, I wish they would have just had a scene where he forgot like bipolar medication or something, because I felt like his character seemed irrational. I don't know, that's the only way I can really put it. It didn't seem like a logical flow. This whole part with him in the hole. So if you haven't seen the movie, he starts hearing this sound in the ground. He starts digging down to get to the sound, and then eventually realizes there's the dead body. The person before him had done that too, seemingly a cycle. So there's a lot of the movie where he's in this hole. Like way too much of this movie, Jesse Eisenberg is in this hole, and I don't understand why. That's a lie. I absolutely understand why. It's probably because they didn't have the budget to afford him. Jesse Eisenberg is a pretty big actor for a small movie like this, and typically movies like this will spend a good chunk of their budget on an actor of his caliber. So it's very reasonable to think that they only had 2 to 3 days to shoot with him, maybe, because that's all they could afford. So they decided to put him in one place, which is the hole, for the majority of the movie, and just shoot him so you could knock out all of that coverage in a couple hours. It's actually a really clever idea if you can't afford an actor, but honestly I would have rather his character died like halfway through the movie or something, because at a certain point, every time it went back to him digging in the hole, I started to get so frustrated. I was like, are we seriously back in this stupid hole again? And then when all he found at the end was a dead body, he didn't find any further mystery. He didn't figure out that there's like maybe underground tunnels or generators, or maybe there's an alien spaceship and they're on top of it. I don't know, anything. I would have taken anything. There could have been eggs and those are where the babies came. I literally would have taken anything. But the fact that he just figures out that the guy before him did the same thing, like I said, satisfying for a short film, but for a feature film, that is so disappointing. There was also another plot point that I thought was really interesting, and they just kind of skipped over the interesting part, So it was getting interesting, they skipped over the middle and then just ended. So the little boy that's dropped off, or the baby or whatever, and they have to raise it, it ages super fast. And we don't really understand in the movie how fast it's actually aging, so it could be over weeks or months. But it looks like a little boy, but obviously it's some kind of little alien thing. They show later that it can like swell up its throat and scream like those birds that it showed at the beginning. So, really they're really heavily implying that they're like these birds, or really taking inspiration from that. So it's really interesting seeing this kid develop, but they only really show him at 3 stages. Like, they show him, when they first get him, they show him as like an 8 to 10 year old. I'm really bad at telling kids ages. This little creep right here in the middle. And then they jump to him being an adult. And that's creepy. Like, it's scary when he's an adult, because all of a sudden he's cold and they've been kind of nice to him, kind of abusive, so he's not super happy with them. That gets really scary when she has to start begging this alien kid thing, and the power dynamic shifts. And that was really interesting, but we just literally skipped from him being a little boy to him being a man. I really wanted to see when she started to fear him, when that day clicked in, and they just skipped it. The first half of this movie was super tense and intriguing and interesting, and the acting was alright, and the writing was kind of wonky, and the dialogue wasn't great. But once Jesse Eisenberg starts digging his own grave in it, he really digs the movie's grave too. It just literally, it goes downhill so fast from there. Everything that I found interesting about it started to kind of fade out of it. In the movie, they talk about how the food there is bland and it doesn't taste like food. The longer I watched that movie, that's how I felt about the movie. Like, the blander and blander it tasted, to a point to where I wanted to stop watching it, but I was just really hoping they were gonna pull something out of left field. And they didn't. I guess if this movie would have came out in like the 90s, early 2000s, this would have been probably pretty good. But I feel like now where cinema's at, people kind of demand a little bit more from storytelling. Plots that are a little more fleshed out, worlds that feel more real, and characters that we can relate to. If I had to give it a rating, I don't know, I'd probably give it like a low C, I guess. It wasn't terrible, but don't expect to feel like you necessarily accomplished something at the end. So this was my review of Vivarium. I hope that you found it helpful, intriguing. I don't know what you wanted from this, but I'm glad that you're here, glad that you stuck around. Please let me know what other movies you'd like me to review. I have Snowpiercer is one that I have coming up. I want to do one on The Truman Show, but that one's going to take a little while. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys want to see. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great day.